Welcome to episode 60 of Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. Visit us at letstalkbitcoin.com for our daily guest blog, all our past episodes, and of course, tipping addresses. My name is Adam B. Levine, and today it's just obvious that everything old is new again. When I say gift card, you think plastic, but with smartphone app Gift, you can put away your wallet and cash in your Bitcoin. I sat down with Gift CEO Vinny Lingham to talk gift cards as budgeting in the modern world, the allure of the Bitcoin meal, and why spending Bitcoin now gets you more bang for your gift card buck. Then, CoinLab can't catch a break. Aside from the ongoing Mt. Gox drama, their first internally incubated project rolled over in less than 6 months with massive losses. Would the price of Bitcoin have changed the fate of this failure? Andreas and Stephanie join me to talk about it. We end today's show with an editorial from LTB contributing editor George Ettinger. His proposal, entitled Infinitely Divided We Stand, is a question and a challenge. You can email him directly via george@letstalkbitcoin.com. But first, Silk Road is dead. Long live Silk Road. Before the dust is settled, a new site claiming to be born from the ashes of the old has emerged, and a new Dread Pirate Roberts has been crowned. Is this the Napster effect or a honeypot? Is a new Silk Road better than an old black market reloaded? And what's in a name anyways? Let's talk about it. Enjoy the show.
So last month we talked about the Silk Road being busted and this guy being arrested who may be allegedly the Dread Pirate Roberts, the boss of the Silk Road. And people were predicting, relatively quickly there were some kind of Silk Road copycats that sprung up. And Silk Road, of course, for anybody who doesn't know or isn't familiar, was a hidden website accessible through Tor, where people could connect to buy and sell drugs online and various other things. There were, I think, banned books on there. There were some other things, passports, IDs, and various illegal stuff. So this went on for quite a long time, and it was the subject of a lot of media attention. There were so many journalists who said, Bitcoin is just for buying drugs online, because of course you could use Bitcoin to do this. A lot of studies showed that this was not actually the primary thing that people were using Bitcoin for. And I like to quote the survey from Zero Hedge about a year ago that said actually the most common use of Bitcoins at the time was not buying drugs online. It was actually donating them or giving them as gifts. So giving charitable contributions, tips, gifts, etc. with their Bitcoins. Relatively quickly after the Silk Road bust, copycat marketplaces started to arise, and people were in short order trading drugs online with these copycats. Well, recently there's been the relaunch of something new. It's called Silk Road 2.0, complete with its own Dread Pirate Roberts, a person who is obviously not Ross Ulbricht because he's sitting in a prison cell. This is pretty interesting because not much more than a month later, I think it was 5 weeks after the bust of the original Silk Road 2.0 launches, the Silk Road forums were, I guess, seized by the FBI, and some admin of the forums moved them to another website. And I have to say, I haven't followed the Silk Road personally, I haven't gone on it. So all of this I'm hearing secondhand through different journalism. So I apologize if there are some details missing, but this is my understanding of it. So they've moved their forum, and the forum pretty much continues. And then there's this new Silk Road site, Silk Road 2.0, and it's pretty much business as usual. Some people are kind of paranoid about this, understandably, which I think I would be too if something like this happened to me. Paranoid that this Silk Road 2.0 is just basically a honeypot, that the federal government has set up the Silk Road 2.0 to encourage people to jump on there, and then they're going to bust everybody for buying drugs. Some people say it's legit because this forum admin was very trustworthy, and they believe that this new site is actually real. I guess the new Dread Pirate Roberts, and by the way, that name comes from the Princess Bride, and sort of one of the points about it that sometimes gets missed in the media is that there's supposed to be a lot of different people who have the name Dread Pirate Roberts. And so it's
like
kind
Zorro.
Yeah, right. It could be almost anybody. So apparently one of the new Dread Pirate Robertses has done an interview with some major publication through encrypted email. They insist they don't know who he is or she is, and they just kind of leave it at that. But this person insists that this site is real and that they've risen from the ashes. And it was kind of interesting because a government official came out and made a statement about this and said, you know, we're going to have to adapt our lawmaking policies to the ever-changing technology. And I haven't seen them do that yet. So
sounds to me like we're going to have like an illegal company analog act or something like that, where if an illegal company gets shut down and you start something that, you know, is similar to it, then that's the sort of way that something like this would be treated if they were going to do anything about it, right?
It's interesting to me because I think of the Pirate Bay. You know, they had their servers seized at one point, and then they just moved them, and now they're floating in the middle of the sea, or they're decentralized or something like that. It's like whack-a-mole. These quote authorities are trying to keep up with all of this illegal activity, but it's moving too fast for them, and they just can't keep up. And if this is in fact real, if it's not a honeypot, I mean, maybe they can keep up, and maybe this new Silk Road is actually created by the feds, and then people are going to get busted. I wouldn't recommend going to any of these things, but some people clearly are.
Well, the one thing we do know is that no matter what this new Silk Road is, this will not be the end of the war on drugs. This will not be the final nail that destroys the war on drugs and says, okay, well, turns out if we do enough enforcement, people will stop buying drugs. If you attack the supply enough, people will stop buying drugs. If you apply enough prohibition, people will stop buying drugs. The simple truth of it is people will not stop buying drugs. It's the second most traded commodity in the world after food. If you include the broader measure of drugs, which includes most of the recreational things that are legal and the recreational things that are illegal, both here and across the world. Prohibition kills people. Drugs don't kill people. Drug prohibition kills people. And so this attack against more and more suppliers and honeypots is yet another example of failure in prohibition. It won't change anything other than endanger the lives of those who want to buy recreational drugs with Bitcoin, which they can do just as easily with US dollars. A currency that you can't buy drugs in is a crappy currency. If you can't buy the second most traded commodity in the world with your currency, it's not very good money. So of course you can buy drugs with Bitcoin. If you couldn't, there'd be something wrong with the currency. What's wrong here is the assumption that if we kill enough of the suppliers, we're going to somehow stop the demand in drugs. And my question is, how many more people have to die before we learn that lesson?
The core thing for me is that in these situations where you don't really have identity to rely on, because the identity, you don't really know who's behind it. It's not real. It's not an identity you can actually rely on being able to, have a contractual obligation with. Because that's gone from the original Silk Road, I really don't see how any of these sites, regardless of whether or not they're Silk Road 2 or not, can be trusted at all. Because, I mean, even if it's not the government, it could be somebody else who just put up a different site, to scrape the site and put it up that looks similar to it, or just stole the branding. And again, they could hang around and be totally functional for 6 months, a year, however long it takes until they get to their point. I mean, again, like, what you need is a track record. And so it's kind of a chicken egg problem where if you have no trust and no track record, it's very difficult to acquire that in the beginning unless you have people who have no other options and they're willing to risk. And right now, that's not really the case.
No, it is the case, because what is the alternative, Adam? The alternative is to go out on the streets and try to procure the drugs from someone who is physically immediately in front of you and therefore can stab you, shoot you, rob you, mug you, rape you, and kill you. And the alternative of a digital marketplace that may be a honeypot, may not be a honeypot, but can certainly not stab you over TCP/IP is a much better proposition for anyone. So the options people have are: quit doing drugs entirely. That's not going to happen. Buy their drugs on the street with all of the risks that come with that and all of the death that comes with that. Or buy them from a marketplace that potentially is a honeypot. Well, that is a very big risk for the sellers. It's a much less of a risk for the buyers. And therefore, I think they will flock to it. and all other sites that offer it because it's better than the physical alternative.
Right, but it's that all other sites that offer it thing that I think is kind of the point that I'm trying to make. You know, you look at a site like Black Market Reloaded, and even though I think that they're probably much smaller than the Silk Road was, they've still been around longer than the new Silk Road has. So what I'm saying is, does the game start over at some point? Just as with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, one could argue, is in a dominant position because it's been around the longest. It's the thing that people got used to, got attached to, and invested in first. And so is the same thing true here?
Silk Road was around for quite a while.
Yes, but then it went away. But then it went away in a very public fashion and is run by new people. So, I mean, he may be very trusted, but again, all you're talking about is a PGP key.
The argument you're making here is trust versus brand, really, which is the brand stickiness of Silk Road enough to overcome the rational concerns one might have about the trust that they should put into this new system versus the brand of some other black market that is not as well known. And the thing is, most people will not make a rational risk assessment of the chance of it being a honeypot. Instead, they will have heard of the brand will lead them to do a search and will lead them to the site. And because they've heard of the brand, that will overcome any of the trust issues they have. And that's why it makes for a perfect honeypot. So I think brand in the end wins.
Even if it's something so serious like this, because I mean, if they're caught, then we're talking about fairly serious, penalties, jail time.
Well, the buyers generally, I would say, don't think about whether they're going to get caught because, first of all, they're high, and secondly, the alternative is dealing with some skeezy dude on the corner. So they will go for the brand that they think they can trust the most, or the brand that they've heard the most, because probably that's the only one they'll find.
Okay, so just for fun, I think it's a honeypot.
I think it's a honeypot, but it doesn't matter because even if it is a honeypot, it's still going to deliver some drugs to some users, and that's fine.
I don't know what it is. I am not ready to make a prediction, but I wouldn't.
Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't trust it. I mean, that's what I mean by that is that like if that was something that I wanted to do, I would be so concerned about that. I mean, good Lord, it's an invitation to get in a lot of trouble.
One of the facts that we have to look at is who has the FBI prosecuted or brought charges against so far in the original Silk Road, which we know was a honeypot for at least 8 months, right? And if you look at the indictments that have come down the pike so far, they have been indictments against sellers, against some of the biggest sellers, and against some of the sellers who were selling opiates and other, let's say, quote, harder, unquote, drugs. And so therefore, I think a lot of buyers see that and they say, well, they haven't really prosecuted anyone who bought a small amount of weed or something like that. And so maybe the risk isn't as high, even if it is a honeypot, because I'm not buying black tar heroin. So therefore, they're not really after me. And that's a rational risk assessment and could therefore be a valid reason why you would use it, even though you suspect highly it is a honeypot, just assuming they're not going to focus on you.
The new Dread Pirate Roberts has made a statement saying that just like in the old Silk Road, they had a policy where weapons and child pornography were banned, that you couldn't buy or sell those on the Silk Road, and they're continuing that policy with Silk Road 2.0. So they do seem to have some, kind of moral standards, right? Which I think is really interesting.
Well, they might, or they're just trying to keep continuity because again, it's about trying to maintain and, if you want the brand, you got to act like the brand.
Yeah, that's very true. Either way, I think the focus on things that involve consensual introduction of chemicals into one's own body without a victim is a very different thing from selling child pornography, for example, which has very, very horrible victims and or guns that will potentially have a victim down the road.
Do you guys think the Bitcoin community who wants Bitcoin to, who wants Bitcoin to survive and thrive and live out its potential, has any role in commenting on things like the Silk Road? What do you think about that?
Well, we've seen, the Bitcoin community built in layers over time. And I think the crowd that started out using the Silk Road probably was a pretty early layer. So they're ingrained in this culture. But at times like this, when we talk about the Silk Road and we talk about Bitcoin and drugs, I think it's really, really important that we always mention that the total volume of drugs that are transacted in Bitcoin is less than 1% of the global drug trafficking numbers. And it's actually far below 1%. So again,
right.
The real currency that people are trading for drugs in is US dollars and other local currencies, but mostly US dollars. So
the thing about the US dollar is that it has funded every stage of drug production, planting, harvesting, processing, distribution, smuggling, cutting, resmuggling, distribution again, until eventually it lands on a table where you roll up the actual US dollar bill and then use it to snort the drugs right up your nose. Bitcoin has a very limited role vis-a-vis all of those steps. And so it's really quite ironic and hypocritical to look at Bitcoin as having any impact really on the drug trade or any real involvement in the drug trade other than as an efficient means of transaction. The thing here is that all of these edge cases where you're dealing with illicit goods or goods that are banned or whatever, where the friction of the currency really matters, are edge cases we're going to test Bitcoin and test its relationship with regulators and test its relationship with lawmakers and test its relationship with law enforcement, because this is the sharp edge of some of the Bitcoin capabilities. This is where some of the Bitcoin capabilities start actually hurting or rubbing up against our regulatory, political, and legal framework because it's not designed to tolerate these kinds of exceptions, and Bitcoin is very much the exception.
Hi, listener. Here at Let's Talk Bitcoin, we're building a global network of correspondents able to contribute on-the-ground perspective when cryptocurrency-related information comes across their filters. If you'd like to join our global conversation, send an email with your name and geographic or cultural niche to apply@letstalkbitcoin.com. Just like Bitcoin, the only barrier to entry is your time and good work. Thanks for listening.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB.
Vinny Lingham is the co-founder and CEO of Gyft. Their smartphone app essentially takes the card out of gift cards, and you can use Bitcoins to do it. Vinny, thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Bitcoin.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be here with you.
So I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't used a gift card, plastic or otherwise, in quite a while, and I hadn't heard of a company like yours until I actually got involved with Bitcoin, and I saw that a company like yours accepted it. Can you kind of tell me how Gyft came into being?
We looked at the market for gift cards about 2 years ago, and it's an unbelievable market. We're talking about $125 billion a year in the US alone in terms of gift card sales. So this is something which, the recent reports that have come out says that gift cards are the number one requested Christmas present above, electronics and toys. So people like it. They love the gift of choice. They love the idea that they can go and choose what they want at their favorite stores. And the notion of buying someone an item which you think or hope that they want and do not have, it's kind of outdated, right? We're way past that in today's society, and people have way more choices. There's way more things you can do with your money and be smart about how you spend it. So when you're giving a gift, giving the gift of choice, in this form of a gift card, has become a cultural shift for a lot of people. We're also seeing that there's a ton of unbanked people, especially young adults, that don't have bank accounts. They don't want bank accounts. They don't want to be part of the cost center that banks provide for consumers, where there's fees, et cetera, et cetera. So we're seeing a lot of young kids asking their parents to send them gift cards instead, so they know that the $100 that they get, that's $100 that they can spend on whatever they want. So I think it's the merger of obviously the mobile smartphone revolution, along with I think what's happening in financial services, along with what's happening from a social norms perspective around gifting, And that led to the birth of Gift as a company 2 years ago.
You said there that people don't want to have a bank account, younger people especially, and that they want to make sure that their money is liquid. I mean, like, I get that, and I can see, you know, the circumstances that we find ourselves in certainly lend themselves to that. Is that a good thing, you think? I guess it doesn't even matter if it's a good thing. It's just what's happening.
Yeah, I think if we take a look at what a bank account represents, okay, it's a custodian account. So someone holds your money. They potentially lend it out to some other people, but they can take money out of it at any point in time for whatever fees and charges they want, and you've got to fight to get your money back. The notion of a bank account is kind of it's a very old concept, and I think the youth these days are saying, look, if it's my money, it's my money. I don't want anyone to take any fees or anything out of there without my permission. And when you have a bank account, you're giving that permission to a third party. And you're saying, this is my money, but if you debit fees, if someone swipes my credit card or my debit card gets stolen, etc., I don't have that control. I don't have that lifeline to live on. You know, and obviously the financial crisis hasn't helped banks in their image in the past 5 years either.
So where does Bitcoin come into play as far as Gift is concerned?
Bitcoin is digital cash. So in our world, and one of the reasons why you asked the question, why didn't a company like ours exist, years ago? It's a very simple answer, is that just the economics don't make sense. The economics of running a gift card business where you don't see your customers, it's all virtual, it's all online. And in the past, obviously, there were no smartphones, so you couldn't render the barcodes and allow people to scan it at the point of sale. It made it very difficult to deliver a gift card as anything but plastic. But now with smartphones and scannable screens and Apple Passbook, etc., what we're finding now is that people are more accustomed to the notion that your gift card is no longer an actual plastic card, which you can use, and you can prepay your purchases. And we're seeing people using it for budgeting, saving. We have so many stories of people using it for allowances, etc. There's so many ways of using it. And because there's no fees with Gift ever, people trust us to be their sort of custodian of their funds.
Can you describe to me a normal use case for someone who's using Gift with Bitcoin? Because you're talking about buying gift cards to kind of lock in value, but a lot of people look at Bitcoin as if that is locking in value by keeping it in Bitcoin. So it seems like when you're turning Bitcoins into a gift card, that's almost like a decision to spend it right then, right?
Just to be clear, when I say locking in value and saving, some people want to budget. So they want to actually put money away towards buying some item at a particular store. I think the Bitcoin community is slightly different because we saw that with people with credit cards, etc., prepaying their gift cards. The gift cards were also a way of like knowing that one guy, for example, said that his wife went to Macy's every month and he gave her a $200 gift card, and that's her budget for the entire month. So she had to stay within that limit. Instead of giving her a debit card to the bank account, which has got all that money in it, he says, look, here's a gift card. That's how much you can spend per month.
That doesn't seem very flattering to the people who are being budgeted for. But I mean, I guess if that solves a problem, then, it's a problem to solve.
Well, it's not. I mean, that was one anecdote. We've got tons of stories around this. I mean, we've got people who, for example, tell us about, we have one guy who literally sends his kids every week a gift card. And then we emailed him and said, like, do you mind telling us your story? He goes, you're one of our power users, and we'd love to know what you're doing with Gift. He says, it's simple. My kids are in college, and every week on a Friday night, I send them money. I don't want to send them cash. They tell me which restaurant they're going to and where they want to spend the money. I send them the gift card, and I know that they're spending it in that place. They're not buying alcohol. They're not doing whatever else they're doing with it. They're actually just spending it at that store, and I feel comfortable that that's what they're doing. With someone budgeting their spouse, okay, that's kind of weird, but people do different things and how they budget their personal lives. But when it comes to your kids, I think it's way more clearer that when you want to give someone a gift card for budgeting purposes, and I would be more comfortable giving my kid a card where they can spend it and I know where they're spending it, than just, here's $100, have fun in Vegas.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense to me. Yeah, for kids. So when you see people purchasing with Bitcoin, are they doing this, in these like bulk amounts where it's like this is a month worth of the thing? Or is it more I'm at a restaurant or I'm at a store and here's a thing I want to buy. I need, $85 worth of gift card to this, and just order it right there. I mean, are both of those use cases that you cater to?
We cater more to, obviously we sell predefined denominations, which the retailers give us. So we can't give you a gift card for $85.22. But you can buy a $100 gift card and hopefully you'll spend the money again with them later on. So the use case, I think, for Bitcoin users is that when you want to actually spend your Bitcoin, and a lot of people are starting to earn Bitcoin as part of their salary. I know a ton of people who in the Bitcoin community are just saying, look, I want Bitcoin as my salary, and then when I want to spend it, if I want to spend it that particular second and I'm in a store, I will cash those Bitcoins out in store for what I want to buy, and they use it on the spot. So they get a gift card, which they can redeem right there and then.
That's a really interesting phenomenon to me because, again, you use BitPay to enable these Bitcoin transactions, right?
We do.
Okay, so then you're like a second layer of bridge company, right? Because the companies that you interface with, you don't compensate your merchants in Bitcoin. Even if a user pays in Bitcoin, you're probably compensating them in dollars, right?
Oh, we have to, yes. They
Right,
don't
exactly.
accept Bitcoin for gift cards. Right.
So that's basically the same thing that BitPay already does. So you have two layers of bridge companies there, but neither of you are taking fees. How is that possible?
Right. So that's part of the amazing part about Bitcoin. Because the costs are so low, we're able to absorb the processing fees. And, BitPay has recently moved to a very good pricing model. So there's a fixed rate pricing model we pay per month for all the processing. And as a result, we are going to be passing those benefits onto the consumers.
So what happens to the Bitcoins that you bring in? Are those all just going to BitPay and then back onto the market? Or are you keeping any, to try and speculate on the future value? Because we've been talking about this idea of how when you're talking about a deflationary currency, a lot of the business models that you really have to look at to figure out what makes sense to proceed with are actually completely counterintuitive to what you'd expect in a modern world, right? Where you want to make more money on a sale up front. But it seems like in a deflationary paradigm, it actually makes more sense to be cheaper so that people spend with you sooner and then you can reap the reward on the appreciation over time.
That's the idea, yeah.
So now, what happens to the Bitcoins that you bring in? Are you just selling them onto the market or through BitPay? Are you keeping any to speculate on the future value?
So here's what we've done to date. I mean, we only launched with Bitcoin 6 months ago, and we didn't really have enough funding, I suppose, to hang on to the Bitcoins. And unfortunately, obviously, the price has gone up. But we had to convert the coins to dollars to repurchase inventories, just to turn over the business. We announced 2 months ago that we raised $5 million in Series A funding. So we have enough cash right now in the business that we want to be, sensitive to the Bitcoin community's needs, and we want to support the Bitcoin ecosystem. So the big announcement which we made yesterday was that we are now storing all our margin in Bitcoin between now and the end of 2014. So obviously, we need to restock cards so that we'll convert the coins that we need to restock. But all the margin we make, we're going to go long Bitcoin, and we're going to hold that margin in Bitcoins until end of the next year.
So is this just from Bitcoin sales, or is this from all sales in the Gift Network, and you're choosing to convert even ones that aren't in Bitcoin into Bitcoin?
No, just Bitcoin sales.
One of the other things that I've really been wondering is, does the price matter when it comes to people spending these Bitcoins? Like sometimes when the price is moving around a lot, it seems like people are really reticent, whether it's up or down, to sell because they don't want to be wrong. Have you noticed any sort of trends in terms of how people are using your application with Bitcoin?
So we've tracked, obviously, the Bitcoin price and volume against the gift card sales. I think the biggest problem, honestly, in the world right now of Bitcoin is the spread between Mt. Gox and the other exchanges. Because people see the Mt. Gox prices, and then they look at the exchange prices, and they're trying to reconcile why is there a difference. So when the spread narrows, obviously we do a lot more business. When the spread widens, we don't, because I think people have the misconception that those prices are true. And I think over time, Mt. Gox is going to be less and less of a factor in pricing. So I think that has one impact on our business. The second impact on our business, obviously, is whether or not people believe the price is going to move or not move. So what we find is when it's in a steady state, we actually do a lot better. When it's moving up, we do really well. When the price is coming down, people tend to hold. So it's actually a good thing. We see that the Bitcoin users don't see price drops as a way of cashing out. So they would rather lock in gains on the way up than cash out on the way down.
Huh. That's really interesting. Are there any other metrics that you're tracking or things or any other information you can share? I don't think that there are really, Bitcoin is so decentralized. It's really, really difficult to get any sort of data like that, about how people are actually using it.
Yeah, we have a ton of data. We don't release it, obviously. It's proprietary for our business. But we have a ton of data around this stuff. I think what we're finding is the Bitcoin community is mad and crazy about Bitcoin. We've seen these bubbles come and go, right? We've seen it go from 20 cents to $30 down to $2 down to, up to $2.55 down to $50. It's been all over the place. But I think if you look at the current bull run that we've been in, it's been pretty strong. The price fluctuations is pretty much in par with what you see in some of the major blue chip stocks.
Yeah, it has been. This time especially has just felt different. Again, this is the thing that everybody always says, but legitimately, there seems like there's some decent support, and it seems like, there has to be a pullback, but it just feels a little bit different. I've been in the last two crashes too, and this one is a little bit weird. Are there any particular brands that stand out as really big recipients of Bitcoin funds or Bitcoin users?
So we don't release this information, again, proprietary stuff, but we obviously there's an affinity. I would say the affinity toward brands is less so than the affinity towards categories. So we find Bitcoin users spend a lot of money on restaurants and food more than they do on what our typical audience does. So where our typical audience may be shopping, wine, gifts, that sort of thing, retail, Bitcoin community actually goes towards obviously a lot of, I would say electronics and shopping as well, but we have a lot of Bitcoin users who go to Burger King and Red Robin and all those places. And the notion of paying for a meal using Bitcoins is just something which intrigues people. So, hey,
yeah,
whatever works for them.
Okay, and you probably can't answer this question. Can you give me a ballpark on how much of the business Bitcoin actually is accounting for?
You can see from the advertising we're doing and the promotions we're doing, it's significant. It's enough to fund itself and keep going. And the thing about the Bitcoin users, which really sort of makes us support the Bitcoin communities, obviously I'm a Bitcoiner myself, so I'm passionate about it, but it's the passion that they have for our product and the fact that they tell their friends. And we've seen people who are friends with Bitcoin users who join Gift, and they don't use Bitcoin, they use credit cards. So the Bitcoin community is your early adopters, it's your influencers, it's the typical influencer and early adopter community that was around for the internet as well. And they're spreading the word about what we're doing. So more than half of our new customers every day comes from word of mouth. And we've surveyed our users, and it's pure word of mouth.
That sounds really promising. I have to say, this sounds like, you guys are pretty happy with how this is going.
Yeah, I mean, we're exceptionally happy with how things are going. And we want to thank the Bitcoin community for all their support, and we'll keep trying to give value back to them.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think we announced the release of points. And, essentially that means that the Bitcoin community can now earn gift points, 3% back on all their purchases using Gift for all the day-to-day purchases. So now, this is better than any credit card program you'll ever find. I mean, most credit card programs give you a half a point to maybe 1.5 points back in terms of points, 1% back in points. And we're giving 3% back. And the way we're doing this is we're saying, look, if we're going to sell this through Bitcoin and not credit cards, we're going to save that credit card fees and we're going to give it back to the community and actually make their lives better by saying, why should you be cross-subsidizing the cost of everyone else's purchases? When you go into a supermarket or a retailer, they've already factored in 3% of their prices for credit card fees, because most people buy credit cards in these stores. They've got to factor in credit card fraud, credit card fees, et cetera, et cetera. So the moment you walk into a store, you're not paying with a credit card, you're losing. And if you're paying cash, you're cross-subsidizing someone else's credit card. So we're just saying, look, let's just reinvent this whole retail space. We're going to give you the gift cards. We're going to give you points back to be loyal to Gift and make all your purchases through us, and we'll eat that margin. But thanks to Bitcoin, there's no fees, so we're able to give you a huge upside and add value to your lives. And that's, I think, one of the tenets of our company. I think we're going to continue to be innovative in this space, and get value back in the hands of people who want to use Bitcoin.
As far as these points are concerned, how exactly does that work? Is this like you get 3% back, and then with these points you buy more of the gift cards?
Absolutely. So it works like most rewards programs. You get 3% of your spend back in points, and you can use those points for a new purchase. So if you buy $1,000 worth of gift cards from us in a particular month, we'll give you, I think something like 30,000 gift points. Sorry, 3,000 gift points, which is $30.
Okay, and so that's specifically for Bitcoin. Do you have this program also for other payment methods as well?
We do, but we give credit card users 1%, and we're giving PayPal on promotion now 2% as well, because we're just launching PayPal. Bitcoin gets the highest. Bitcoin gets 3 points back.
And that's really interesting. Again, I've been fascinated with this idea that it makes a ton of sense to actually incentivize and give discounts for people paying with Bitcoin. But I think that you're the first, certainly the largest company that I've seen that's actually doing this. That's incredible. So this just started?
Yep, we just launched it last week.
Okay, well, I can't wait to see it. So once again, thank you, Vinny Lingham, for joining us, CEO of Gift. This was a really great conversation, and I look forward to seeing your product continue to develop.
Thanks, Adam. It's been great being on the show with you. Thank you.
Is the Bitcoin price in a bubble? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. Bitcoin video passes are on sale. Normally $75 for those paying in US funds. Visit bitcoinvideopass.com and spend only 0.1 to 0.2 Bitcoins, 0.12 Bitcoins at the time this was recorded, to access all the talks and panels from the October cryptocurrency conference. See how easy buying with Bitcoin can be and experience instant access as soon as you've paid without even reloading the page. Check it out at bitcoinvideopass.com.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at seansoutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.
So it seems like CoinLab just can't catch a break. In the time since we last checked in with them, CoinLab was partnering with Mt. Gox, and then there were a series of lawsuits and countersuits, essentially because the regulatory environment changed a couple of days before the contractual regulatory requirement was due. And so because of that, because there was so little time in order to get back into compliance with the new requirements, then they were in breach of contract, and there's a lot of nonsense going back and forth on that. What's happened now is that after pivoting away from trying to be Mt. Gox's U.S. arm of operations, they essentially got into the accelerator or incubator space. Their first spinoff was called Allidian, which was a company that was aiming to essentially allow users to buy mining rigs and host them at an offsite facility. It has declared bankruptcy, is very much so in debt, and seems to have been a pretty massive loss for CoinLab.
This is a typical kind of Silicon Valley thing where it's an old style startup with a lot of VC type funding from various sources in the millions and very little in tech innovation underpinning it.
This was one of those, we've been talking about ASIC mining a lot, and this was one of those projects that was aiming to have essentially a plug and play solution where you essentially just plug in the box, plug it into to an Ethernet cord into power, and pretty much you're done. It's running and it can operate. You don't actually need to have any technical expertise. Could that have had this problem, or is this just CoinLab?
I mean, yeah, sure. You can solve that problem. I mean, the question we really need to ask ourselves at this point in the Bitcoin ecosystem, do we need to be building businesses that have millions of dollars in venture capital funding? And I think that model is really broken and is the old model for doing businesses. And there's so much opportunity for innovation on the blockchain. What we don't need is innovation in fundraising schemes and lawsuits, which seems to be, by the way, the main business plan of CoinLab is partnerships, mergers and acquisitions, and lawsuits. I so far have not seen a single piece of technology come out of that company after almost 2 years, and yet its leader is the head of the Bitcoin Foundation. It's kind of bizarre.
So might this be sort of a horrible warning to traditional kind of VCs that this model may not be working in the Bitcoin space, and will this deter them from maybe funding other companies? And is that a good or a bad thing?
I think the risks in the regulatory environment are clear for anyone to see. VCs who try to play this game need to be ready for massive losses. The only question is this a good business for Bitcoin? And that's the question I'm most interested in, is do these types of businesses really add value to the Bitcoin environment and network? And I would say some do, some really don't. They're just corporate shell games that have nothing to do with innovation on the blockchain.
This would have been better for CoinLab if they had just invested the funds into Bitcoin itself, of course, because this is a bankruptcy, but even so, even if they had won, they must have been looking for like a 10 times, 100 times, something like that multiplier from their investment if they're going to be putting that in instead of Bitcoin. This is, of course, another question is, since this bankruptcy has come to light, the price of Bitcoin has skyrocketed. I wonder if maybe Bitcoin was $150 higher at the time that they were looking at declaring bankruptcy, if they would have been, because ultimately ASIC mining is as profitable as the exchange rate, right?
That's a very good point. So what we're saying really is that they created a business that was very, very, very heavily exposed to the volatility in the currency. Well, there you go. That's one of the reasons why it went down.
Actually, Adam, I would say ASIC mining is less profitable than the exchange rate, because still you have to invest all this money in the hardware, and you've got to maintain it, and you got to make sure it's running, and you got to power it. So Yeah, it's not even as simple as the exchange rate. It's like you're already starting off at a disadvantage and have to recoup some costs before making any kind of a profit.
My point was that if you're earning with mining, you're earning a fixed amount of Bitcoin based on your hashing power compared to the rest of the network. But if that Bitcoin is worth $1 per Bitcoin, then obviously there's a lot less profit in it than if it's worth $500 per Bitcoin. That was my point, is that the exchange rate has a huge impact on how profitable mining is, assuming you are mining to sell.
Well, here's the bottom line. I think if you look at mining with a sober analytical perspective, mining should not be profitable, not over the long term. Why? Because it's an almost perfect market. The barriers to entry are not that high. The technology used is commoditized for the most part, or rapidly becoming so. And the difficulty is self-adjusting. It's designed to remove profits, and an efficient market should work like that. If you're offering something that has little differentiation or value add over everybody else, and anyone can enter the market, then your profit margin will approach zero asymptotically as you stay longer in the market. So yeah, mining should never be profitable. That's how it works.
Well, mining shouldn't eventually be profitable, but I think saying it should never be profitable.
So over the long term and as an entire industry, what mining offers is the opportunity to gain some advantage by being an early adopter. But over the long term and as an entire industry, it will be barely profitable. Right. And that's right. That's how the market should reach an equilibrium where it really reflects the value of the service and the difficulties of getting into it.
Right. You get no disagreement from me on that. But again, it's that core middle part, right? Because we had the beginning. I would argue that, the very, very beginning was the wild gold rush days, and obviously we've kind of seen that come to fruition where the people who were involved at that point have become the people who are, major players in the space and generally quite wealthy. So I understand that, at the end of this, you have that. But for me, it's like the ASIC question too, right? So the ASIC end game is that there are tiny ASICs in every water heater, car, cell phone, everything that does everything. And I can see that. And that indeed would be something, where it's like basically break even because the hardware is completely pervasive and absolutely everywhere. But I don't see how you get from where we are now with the couple of ASIC manufacturers competing wildly against each other to that place without a crazy amount of profit being made by someone during the interim.
Well, no, it's not going to be a crazy amount of profit unless you do it at volume. So basically, this market is now going to favor those who can bring to wield like very, very large economies of scale. So ASIC mining will be profitable, but only at very large scales. If you can put down a data center near hydro or near solar or near some other source of electricity that is extremely cheap and you can cram it with ASICs that you can get actually delivered to that data center, you're going to make a profit. But inherently that's going to be limited only to those who can bring to bear the scale that's required. And that's fine. Markets shouldn't be ridiculously profitable over time, especially if they're not very heavily differentiated. This is a challenge for everyone entering the Bitcoin market, which is at this point in the growth, very few things are innovative and value-giving enough to be better than simply putting your money into Bitcoin and holding.
Infinitely Divided We Stand, Why Setting Standards Today is an Investment in Bitcoin's Future, by George Ettinger. Bitcoin's been accused more than once of being ultra-exclusive. With our market cap of 21 million Bitcoins a century away, our current 12 million in print puts us already halfway there. 21 million already isn't a lot to share among 7 billion inhabitants, much less the 12 million we have right now. Unfortunately, we have far less than even that.
The Dread Pirates' Lost Treasure.
One of the newest crises du jour in the face of Silk Road's shutdown is not only the fate of the 26,000 coins the FBI has seized, but the nearly mythical 500,000 they haven't. Despite the 26,000 coins the FBI was able to quickly round up from Silk Road escrow and assets, it appears that Dread Pirate Roberts' own accumulated funds are still out of their reach. With his wallet in hand, they lack the necessary encryption keys to open Dread pirate Ross Ulbricht's supposed 600,000 Bitcoin stash. The lost fortune of the notorious bandit proprietor of Silk Road? The screenplay writes itself. What then if this legendary pirate treasure is never opened? Out of a present 12 million Bitcoins in circulation, this is potentially 5% of the entire supply. Further on, still nearly 3% of all Bitcoins there shall ever be. And yet, that's nothing compared to the scope of the untouched Satoshi wallet, an address sitting on more than 1.1 million Bitcoins that have not moved in years. Whether or not it's genuinely the lost vault of Satoshi him, her, their self, it's nonetheless another 10% of the pool gone as well. These two grandiose sums are 1/7 of the market now taken out of the game. Add in the incalculable amount of Bitcoin wallets and keys lost or deleted over the last 3 years, and we could have this much all over again. The pool is leaking, and it may end up leaking faster than we can fill it.
The dwindling reserves.
Lost Bitcoins are a more unforgiving hazard than many of us care to admit. The word lost conjures up reassuring notions of checking between couch cushions and under furniture. It gives you delusions of something waiting to be found. Your optimism is no good here. Lost Bitcoins are practically destroyed, and it happens on a regular basis. It isn't just a matter of feds seizing and squatting on funds. Hell, those might still re-enter the market in some way. No, this is the threat from acts of God and man. Hard drives crash, backups fail, the best laid passphrases of mice and men can be forgotten. Plenty of Bitcoins have even just been thrown away as digital clutter. As one early miner on Bitcoin Talk admitted, Bitcoin was worthless then. The software was annoying, I didn't keep my original wallet. The actual number of Bitcoins this economy can still count on are difficult to measure, but the ones we've confirmed lost thus far are more than enough to fuel Bitcoin's detractors. Those who call it exclusive, a scam, or simply use deflationary as a pejorative can find plenty wrong with this trend. A future of reduced mining rewards combined with more frequent coin-losing catastrophes. The die-hard deflationists will suggest another point of view, that every coin lost just bolsters the value of the ones being held. The Bitcoin Wiki assures us if you lose your coins, all other coins will go up in value a little. Consider it a donation to other Bitcoin users. And they aren't wrong, at least not mathematically. Increased scarcity with consistent demand does lead to higher value. But there's a world of other consequences that will affect the perception and function of value. Massive events that lead to lost coins tend to have far-reaching repercussions in and of themselves. Prices have rebounded with gusto since the collapse of the Silk Road, but this was more an expression of consumer confidence than the ripples of lost coins increasing value. Of course, higher values per coin are great for existing owners and investors, but if we keep losing coins on the scale of Ulbricht and Satoshi's lost stashes, the handful of coins remaining will start to develop an ivory tower around them. Or will they? Anyone who knows their way around a transaction knows what's supposed to prevent this. One of Bitcoin's most intrinsic features can keep the currency viable for the masses, but only if our culture can embrace it in full.
The Great Dividers.
The immediate, obvious reassurance is that Bitcoin is infinitely divisible. Well, that's not actually true at all. It's not infinite, but it's a hell of a lot, and it feels good to say infinite, so we will. Many of you already know the details, but for those who don't, infinite divisibility is the subtle bread and butter of Bitcoin transactions. Bitcoin can be sent in fractions as small as 8 decimal places. The often mentioned Satoshi of Bitcoin, the smallest chunk of change, is 0.0000001 Bitcoin. That's 7 zeros. The 21 million limit on whole Bitcoins seems a lot less threatening when you think of it as roughly 2 quadrillion Satoshis. Compared to the estimated $1 trillion US in circulation, that leaves us a little breathing room to lose a few coins over the years. Bitcoin needs to scale down, and it needs to scale with methods that suit the modern world. The Satoshi is, right now, a junk unit. A technological benchmark, not a fiscal one. While it's possible we may eventually reach the scenario of operating on a Satoshi level, such a tremendous gap would prove insurmountable to the thousands of new Bitcoin users arriving every week. We already have a crisis of decimal illiteracy in the innumerate and proud United States threatening to hold it back. This is where the crypto community of the world needs to find kinship in the scientific. The International System of Units, established in 1960, set the course for scientific and mathematics work on a global level. Global standards and the resulting phase-out of regional legacy terminology for scientific and chemical terms have been a boon for the information age. Scientific works worldwide all function on base 10 metric prefixes and suffixes. Today, the centi, kilo, and millimeters of research measurement are recognized apolitically across nearly all borders. A universal language that transcends borders should speak volumes to any Bitcoin supporter. The recent adoption of millibitcoins by wallets and users is a monumental investment towards the currency's future. Bitcoin's ongoing deflation needs a semi-rigid framework to continue scaling. The millibitcoin, be it MBTC, MBIT, Milli, or elsewise, will need to be the recognized standard in the very near future. The theoretical UBTC, the micro-Bitcoin, might not have purpose today, but it's not a long road to reach it. The SI's metric system remains something of a joke in the United States, seemingly the last holdout of imperial units in the modern world. As a nation, it is so deeply entrenched against SI units that change seems impossible. But Bitcoin isn't the United States, and plenty of its users aren't either. However you view your place on the blockchain, a consumer, user, member, hobbyist, lobbyist, advocate, you name it, it's in your best interests to abandon local biases and think globally. No matter how we use or lose it, Bitcoin is going to deflate. To survive these changes, to transcend borders, it has to make way for these new scales. It can't stand on its own if we keep treating it only as a medium of other fiat currencies. Cryptocurrency isn't exclusive to the erudite or the wealthy either. It's exclusive to the open-minded and the hard-working, like the research and technology communities that set these standards. From millis to mics and the occasional kilo, embracing SI units is not only a step towards Bitcoin's future, but a gesture of maturity for a culture that's coming of age.
Thanks for listening to episode 60 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. The segments Silk Road 2.0, What's in a Name, and CoinLab Fail were produced by Adam B. Levine and edited by Matthew Zipkin. They featured Andreas M. Antonopoulos, Stephanie Murphy, and Adam B. Levine. The Gift of Bitcoin was produced by Adam B. Levine, edited by Matthew Zipkin, and featured Adam B. Levine and Vinny Lingham. Infinitely Divided We Stand was written, produced, and read by George Ettinger, edited by Adam B. Levine, with additional voice work by Crystal Levine. Music was provided by Jared Rubens. Questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Have a good one.